Edge of Eternities is the newest set from Magic the Gathering, and with it comes a new Pauper Commander review. Pauper Commander is played with 99 common cards in your deck and 1 uncommon creature in the command zone. But with the release of Edge of Eternities, the rules are changing to include uncommon vehicles and uncommon spacecraft that have a power and toughness as well. Spacecraft are a new artifact type that's released with this set, but we won't really be discussing them much. The other new set mechanics for Edge of Eternities are relatively unnoteworthy. There's Void, which cares about creatures leaving the battlefield or being warped. The warped part isn't relevant, but creatures leaving the battlefield is always been a thing that's happening, so none of those cards are going to have difficulty fitting into the format. Warp, on the other hand, that Void is referring to, is the warp cost that some permanents have that lets you cast them at a different cost, but they go into exile at the end of the turn they entered play, from which you can then cast them again for their full mana cost. Notably though, Warp is a cost that can only be paid from your hand, so it doesn't really impact our assessment on how viable a Pauper Commander would be, since you would normally be casting them from the command zone where Warp doesn't function. With all that said, let's jump into our first card from our top 10 Pauper Commander review. Number 10, Virulent Silencer. Virulent Silencer is a colorless 3-mana 2/3 artifact creature robot assassin that says whenever a non-token artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. As a colorless creature, your deck building options are dramatically limited, which is why colorless cards usually don't make it onto these lists. But since this card is designed around specifically artifact creatures, it's not hindering you very much at all. Your game plan still works perfectly well. In fact, Finn the Fangbear, the most obvious comparison to this card, has fewer options for creatures in its deck, since this only cares about artifact creatures, not specifically Death Touch, giving it a huge upside compared to Finn. That said, it's still a colorless commander, so the rest of your deck is going to struggle with basic staples like card draw and removal, so it does bring it down to the 10th spot on our list. Number 9, Biomechan Engineer. Biomechan Engineer is a 2-mana green and blue 2/2 insect artificer with when this creature enters, create a lander token. Lander tokens are a new token from the set that means this artifact has 2 tap, sacrifice this token, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. They also have 8 generic for draw 2 cards and create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. Read plainly, this might not seem that interesting. 8 mana is a lot to just draw 2 cards and make a 2/2, but it is an infinite mana sink. Green-blue already has an archetype built around making infinite mana using untappers and either creatures or lands that produce more mana than you're spending to infinitely untap them. Once you've done this, you need somewhere to put all that mana. Currently, the popular choices are Gretchen Titchwillow or the Weaver's partners, Ley Weaver and Lore Weaver. The Weavers have the upside of one of them being an untapper and the other one being a mana sink. Gretchen has the benefit of only needing 4 mana before you can start sinking mana into this loop. That said, despite the competition, I think Biomechan Engineer still has a place on this list, because while they may not be doing anything better than anyone else, they're doing it about the same and a little differently. Making that body can be really useful for surviving until you've assembled your combo, being able to make some blockers to keep your opponents at bay. Also, when you go off, you're making bodies while drawing through the deck, not just drawing through your deck. Yes, if you have infinite mana, you can probably close out the game no matter what, as long as you're drawing through your deck, so it's not that important, but I do find it very cool that you can make a whole army of 2/2s, give them haste and swing in for the turn, instead of needing to really find some other mana sink that does damage. At first, I was really unsure if this card does stand up to the other 2 options. Is it actually a side grade, or is it just a downgrade? And eventually I realized this being an 8 generic mana cost, as opposed to Lore Weaver or Gretchen's colored mana sink, is actually a huge upside. Often the thing with these combos is that you end up making infinite of green mana, and it's a lot harder to make infinite of the blue mana that you need to continuously activate the other 2 cards. Biomechan Engineer does not have that issue, and I think that legitimately gives them a niche alongside their peers. Number 8, Ilvoy Infiltrator. Ilvoy Infiltrator is a 3-mana blue 1/3 jellyfish rogue. It reads, this creature can't be blocked if you've cast 2 or more spells this turn, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Now, there's a lot of cards that do this 3-mana creature when it deals combat damage draw. That's not super novel, and a lot of them have ways of becoming unblockable. But I think that this really stands up to a lot of them because of how simple it is to cast 2 spells, especially in a blue Spellslinger deck. Now, it's only going to draw you one card a turn, but it's a pretty reliable way of getting in that one damage. You also could go full Voltron with this. While you'll need other cards to help protect your jellyfish and buff up their stats, being able to reliably get in damage is really important if you're trying to win through commander damage. If every turn you're drawing naturally and then drawing again from Ilvoy Infiltrator, casting 2 spells a turn shouldn't be too hard, and you'll be able to reliably churn through your deck and grind out your opponents. Number 7, Sunstar Lightsmith. Sunstar Lightsmith is a 4-mana white 3/3 human artificer that reads, whenever you cast your second spell each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature and draw a card. Now, compared to the last one, this one can't reliably get in damage unless you give it some form of evasion. But it is constantly growing itself, making it more of an actual threat if you do manage to get in damage with it. But being able to draw this consistently in white is definitely worth mentioning. This also plays a bit differently than Ilvoy Infiltrator because it triggers on each turn. Now, you might only be casting 2 spells in an entire round anyway, so it's not that big of a deal, but if you also do have 4 spells, you could cast 2 on one player's turn and 2 on another player's turn. How many cheap white cantrips can you really fit into a deck? I'm not entirely sure, but this is a very clear build around with a very powerful payoff. Number 6, Umbrell Caller Zealot. Umbrell Caller Zealot is a 2-mana 3/2 human cleric with sacrifice another creature or artifact, surveil 1. A very simple card, but it is such an efficient and powerful sacrifice outlet. There are other options for sacrifice outlets in the command zone, so it's not entirely novel, but the fact that it can hit creatures and artifacts is really notable. The only other relevant card that can do that is Bartolome del Presidio, which is black-white, so if you wanted the extra color, it's an upside, but if you want to be mono-black, it's a downside. And instead of letting you surveil, they give you a +1/+1 counter. What Umbrell Caller Zealot really has going for it is that it lets you surveil, which will let you curate your hand for the better cards to actually play, and fill your graveyard with things that you might want to be reanimating later. If you don't care about sacrificing artifacts, Viscera Seer is oftentimes considered the most efficient sacrifice outlet because it's simply a 1-mana 1/1 that sacrifices a creature to scry 1. But surveilling is just so much better than scrying, and a 1/1 body dies really easily, making Umbrell Caller Zealot feel so much better in every way just for 1 extra mana. Number 5, Seedship Agrarian. Seedship Agrarian is a 4-mana 3/3 green insect scientist that says whenever this creature becomes tapped, create a lander token. They also have landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Just assessing the last ability, this is already a creature that is going to slowly get bigger and bigger, but combined with its first ability, you don't even need other ramp tools to be hitting this ability twice on each of your turns. Now, I love these cards that have the when this becomes tapped trigger because it lets you do something of value to tap them and then also get the benefit. If this just read 2-mana tap, search your library for a basic land and put it into play, it would already be fantastic because you're just ramping every turn on a body for only 2 mana. That is absurd. Now, it's technically not as good as that because you need some way of tapping it. You either need to be attacking with them, which has all of the dangers that combat always has, or you need to find some other way to tap them down, like a spacecraft, a vehicle, or something like Karametra's Favor, giving them an ability to tap for value. So with all the options available, I don't think it's actually going to be all that difficult to be consistently tapping this down. In fact, with this wording, you could even potentially tap them down the turn they enter play through Summoning Sickness. I haven't found any infinite combos you can do with this to tap it down to create an artifact to untap them, but I still think that even just played fairly, this is incredible ramp. Number 4, Weftstalker Ardent. Weftstalker Ardent is a 3-mana 2/3 red Drix Artificer. With whenever another creature or artifact you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. It also has Warp 1. As we previously mentioned, you can't warp from the command zone, so that line of text is probably useless to us. I do think that it makes this card really cool in other formats, but as a Pauper Commander, it basically doesn't matter. This is just an Impact Tremors stapled to a Reckless Fireweaver in the command zone. And you can still run both of those cards in the 99. The question is, how much upside is the artifact mode? If you only care about the creature half, you're probably better off with something like General Create, the Bolt Bender, a 3-mana 2/2 Goblin Soldier that when any goblin you control attacks, they make a goblin. And since they have the Impact Tremors ability, whenever another creature you control enters, General Create deals 1 damage to each opponent, you not only have that Impact Tremors in the command zone, she's also making tokens to trigger it consistently every turn. But with the addition of artifacts, Weftstalker Ardent has such incredible potential. You can have creatures that when they enter, they make a treasure that you can then sacrifice to cast more creatures. I think it's going to really get out of control, and it's going to be legitimately oppressive. Number 3, Biomechan Uros Exile. Biomechan Uros Exile is a 3-mana blue and red 1/3 Jellyfish Advisor. This is basically the exact same ability as Captain Storm Cosmium Raider, except for Captain Storm only lets you target pirates. Now, if you're only planning on going Voltron and putting those counters on the commander itself, then it doesn't really matter if it's targeting anything or targeting a pirate. But having the choice of handing out the counters instead of keeping them to yourself is a legitimate upside. On top of that, Biomechan has flying. So if you were planning on going Voltron, they have a much better time of actually getting in damage and sealing the deal. Number 2, Tanuk, Memorial Ensign. Tanuk Memorial Ensign is a 3-mana green and red 2/4 Kavu pilot. They have landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, Tanuk deals 1 damage to each opponent. If this is the second time this ability is resolved this turn, draw a card. Landfall as ping is something we haven't seen in the command zone before, but we've actually seen it a bunch of times in the 99. Tunneling Geopede, Kosi's Ravager, Spitfire Ligak, Sabotender. Each of these also have landfall ping, which means this is not only a new ability in the command zone, but there's actually a lot of cards that can give you redundancy and synergize with your commander already, and since you're in red-green, not just red, you can run all of your green ramp spells. I'm always a little skeptical of deal 1 damage to everybody, because it just takes a while for that to add up, but if you can win a game by only doing a thing that is just already beneficial, in this case, ramping, I think you're going to have a pretty good time. And number 1, Timeline Color. Timeline Color is a 2-mana for black 2/2 Drix Warlock. They have haste, and you may cast this card from your graveyard using its warp ability. Yes, I said warp would probably not be relevant, but here it is at number 1. Warp, black, pay 2 life. Because you can warp this from your graveyard, it's very relevant. Being able to cast this as a 2-mana bear with haste that you can then sacrifice and recast for as many times as you're willing to pay black and pay 2 life is really strong. There are so many things that want you to be incidentally sacrificing creatures, or when you do, you end up pinging face, and you might need some other sack outlets, but you probably don't care about a free sack outlet for this. This is fuel for powerful sack abilities, not something that needs a free sack outlet so you can constantly kill it. Paying 2 life could eventually catch up to you, but black does have life gain to help offset it. The important thing here, though, is that it is coming into play with haste and able to continuously chip in. You can do a very scary sacrifice aggro deck. Never before have we seen such an efficient creature that you can infinitely recast. We had things like Reassembling Skeletons, which enters tapped and costs 2 mana. Now that didn't need to be cast, it was put into play, so you could do it on your opponent's end step, so being tapped wasn't that big of a deal, and it effectively had haste, but it's still a notable difference. Forsaken Miner, on the other hand, which got my top slot in the Outlaws of Thunder Junction Pauper Commander review, has a similarly cheap cost to put it into play and doesn't cost the extra 2 life, but can only be activated if you committed a crime that turn. This is extra cards and mana that you could have spent on spells that more directly synergize with your commander itself. If you want to see Timeline Color in action, me and my girlfriend actually recorded a demo video of Biomechan Engineer versus Timeline Color in Pauper Commander Duel that you can check out on the channel. She went full mono black, sacrifice aggro, and it was legitimately really scary. Overall, this set looks really good, really cool, and I'm very excited to play it in any format. Have a good night, everyone. I've been Darcy Bits. I do a Pauper Commander review every new set, and I'll see you next time.